Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a session all about creating a Dynamics 365 demo environment with the team from AX Mentor. We have Henrik Ank and Tanya Todd with us today to present. As we get started, please know that we do want to keep today's session interactive. We have a couple of poll questions. The first one I'm actually going to launch right now, and we'll have another one later just to get a little bit of a sense of who you are in the audience and what your background and interests are. You can ask questions as well throughout today's event. Use the Q&A block, and I know Henrik and Tanya will be making time for answering your questions near the end of today's presentation. So without any further delay, I am going to hand things off to Tanya to get us started. Tanya, welcome.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. So again, we are going through creating a Dynamics 365 demo environment. I will specify this is Dynamics 365 for Operations and Finance Enterprise Edition that we're going to go through. So today we are going to go through, we'll just cover the agenda. We're going to go through demo environment options. So there are a couple of different options we'll cover. Specifically, we're just going to go through one of those options today in demo. We're going to go through the full feature set. So of those two options, the full feature set is the one we're most interested in, the prerequisites. So we'll cover off talking through Azure and configuring Lifecycle Services to support that. We're going to walk through deploying the virtual machine through Lifecycle Services, and then we'll move through post-deployment configuration. So in this case, configuring users, Power BI integrations, and enabling the help task guides. So first we're going to talk about the demo environment options. So when we're creating a D365 demo environment, there are a couple of different options for what we can use. The first is a limited feature set demo environment. So that is a free demo environment. Again, it's a limited feature set, and when you sign up for it, you do only get that demo for 7 days. It includes a few task guides, so it helps you navigate through specific scripted features. But unfortunately, that particular demo doesn't give you the full feature demo set. So it's just a subset, a very small subset of information. The full feature demo set, which is more robust and of course gives you access to the full environment, is available for 90 days, but there are some prerequisites for that. So it requires an Azure subscription or Hyper-V, so you can download an image of that particular demo set. You get 90 days, and there are some costs associated with it. So the cost of running Azure is also something to consider if you wanted to go this route to evaluate that full feature demo set. So again, you can download a Hyper-V. There are some limitations of running that Hyper-V. So it's an on-premise Hyper-V. You would download it somewhere to your machine. Only one user could access that virtual machine at a time directly within the virtual machine. It also causes you to not be able to use the feature sets such as Power BI, machine learning, warehouse app. If you're using a Hyper-V, you can't evaluate those easily. So it does come with it some downsides. Also, if you're running the limited feature set or the virtual machine, it may not always be the newest. So using the virtual machine just for learning or creating a small proof of concept or something is a good idea, but again, the full feature set running in the cloud gives you really the most robust ability to evaluate all of the features. When you're using the full feature set in the cloud, you also have the ability to deploy with what demo data set you want to use. So you could use the standard Microsoft Contoso demo data. You could choose to evaluate public sector. You could create an environment with no data. So in this case, you really are going to have the flexibility to choose what you want to see and what you want to evaluate. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the demo environment prerequisites. Again, we are going to move forward with talking through that 90-day evaluation of the full demo set. So in order to get that demo environment prepared, you need to have a customer source account. So if you don't have a customer source account, you'd need to contact your partner or a partner to work with them. And then you would need to request a license. So there is an email address there, daxcf@microsoft.com. And you just send them an email and you provide your AX customer number, your account number, and customer service. Again, you'd contact a partner if you don't have one of those, your current AX version, and your contact information. And then what they do is they would send you back the code, the offer code that you need in order to get the demo environment going. You also would need to have an Azure subscription. So we're going to go through creating an Azure subscription as part of this demo today. You can estimate the costs for running an evaluation environment using Azure. So there is a link there that you can use. Again, there are costs associated with using Azure, so it's important to know that you will be incurring some costs if you're going this route. And then using Lifecycle Services to start and stop the environments when not in use can help keep the costs down. So we'll cover that as well. And then prerequisites, you do need to have access to Lifecycle Services. So you need to create a Lifecycle Services project, add users to the project, and then link that to the Azure subscription. So we will go through all of that today. So next I'm going to hand it over to Henrik, and he's going to walk us through creating the Azure subscription.
Subscription, and we will create a basic Azure subscription. You need to go to azure.com or azure.microsoft.com. There's multiple links that go to the same page. What is important when we create an Azure subscription is that we don't use any of the free ones because there's limits on the free ones, and deploying a VM in Azure for Dynamics 365 will actually consume more resources than is available in the standard free VM. So we'll go through here, buy one. You have an alternative is that if you have a company agreement for Azure on an EA subscription, you can use that as well. So we will click on buy one here. Don't use the start free because you will get an error when you start to deploy the VM later. And the sign up is pretty easy. It's like standard Microsoft signs up. You need to key in your email address. You actually need to key in a phone number also. It's used for two things. You get a verification code back from Microsoft to validate the phone number, but you'll also receive a call from Microsoft after you created the subscription within a few days, where they will basically ask you, are you doing well? Can we help with anything? Blah, blah, blah. The usual things to make sure you're getting some value out of it. So once all that is filled out and everything, the Azure subscription is created. It usually takes a few minutes, even Microsoft's up to 4. It's an easy process. The first thing we see when we access Azure is the Azure portal. What we are seeing here is the new Azure portal with the Azure Resource Manager. There's also an old portal. The link is to the right, managed at windowsazure.com. We will need to access the old portal also as part of this process. Microsoft is in the process to move everything in the old portal into the new portal. The old portal is also sometimes referred to as the classic portal. In order to deploy a VM for a demo, we need to allow certain rights for all the scripts and Lifecycle Services to deploy the VM. So we need to go to subscriptions in Azure. So I've basically here pre-search for subscription. Of course, that will make everything faster. So once we have searched subscription and see the subscription page, we can see here with the I'm moving the mouse here. There's our subscription we created. You will see multiple subscription here if you are deploying into an existing tenant. So click on the subscription here and then go over to click on access control. That's where we allow access to the subscription. While you're on this page, notice on the right there's a subscription ID here. You should write this down or basically copy it to a notepad because we will need it later when we deploy, and then you can avoid going into the screen again. When we click on access control, we get the possibility to add users. So click on add here, and then we need to select a role for what we are adding. And LCS needs to have the contributor role. So click on that, and then we need to search for the user, and we can see here we have Dynamics Deployment Services. So click on that, and then basically just OK, and we see it's added as a contributor. So the subscription is now ready for deploying a VM, and there's really nothing else we need to do here before we can go to LCS. And over to Tanya.
Thanks, Henrik. So once you've got your Azure subscription, then you're ready to start moving into Lifecycle Services. So within Lifecycle Services, the first thing you're going to want to do is log in. So the address is lcs.dynamics.com. You're going to log in, and then you're going to create some users. So you want to use the account here that's going to be the admin user in AX, so it's going to have full access to the Azure subscription. So you're just going to enter in your user ID and password, and then you're going to go ahead and click login. So the first time you log into Lifecycle Services, and also every time they do an update, you are going to have to agree to the legal and privacy agreement, the online service agreement here. So that may pop up. Once you do it, again, you might not see it for another month or so, but every now and then this will come back. So let's go ahead. So Lifecycle Services, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction here. Lifecycle Services is used for Microsoft Dynamics implementations and learning. It allows a user to create projects, to manage those projects, so to learn, to also create project plans, to access information, and in this case, to control and deploy the virtual machines for the demo environment. So in Lifecycle Services, what you'll want to do first is create a project. So again, creating a project, the access and options that you have in Lifecycle Services may differ depending on your license. So for example, Lifecycle Services with production of D365 for operations will have additional features. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the project by clicking on the plus sign. So when you click on the plus sign, you have to choose what the project is for. So in this case, you want to choose Migrate, Create Solutions, and Learn Dynamics 365 for Operations. So again, the options you see here might differ depending on your licensing. So once you've selected that, you do need to provide some additional details. So you want to give your project a name. So give it a name like Demo, for example, or Demo 365, something that's familiar to you, because you will be giving users access to this particular Lifecycle Services project so that they can also log in. Into Lifecycle Services, you might give them access And then you are going to select the methodology. So the methodology that you select here does control what shows up in the sort of default project information that shows up in Lifecycle Services. So the Migrate and Create Dynamics 365 for Operations solution is going to give you content around using that particular functionality. So once you've selected that, you can see where it's going to drop you in Lifecycle Services is into the project and into the Action Center. So this is the Lifecycle Services homepage. You can see here on the left we've got the project. So we're already in the project that we've created. We've got some information on getting started with your project. On the right of the screen, you can see there's sort of a mini project plan. So it's starting at number 1, foundational references, 1.2, navigating Dynamics 365, and so on. So there's content there that also includes some Word documents, some links that are relevant that can help you to sort of learn about the solution. In this case, that is controlled by the methodology we selected when we created the project. So if you selected different methodologies, your options here are going to be different. When we're using Lifecycle Services, especially for deploying a virtual machine or linking the Azure subscription and so on, you do have to scroll over to the right. So this particular website, you will find that you're doing a lot of scrolling. So the other options that we're going to cover are way far in the right of the screen. So in this screenshot, I've scrolled way over to the right, and then we've got some tiles here for more tools. In this case, we're going to be going into the project settings tile in order to tell Lifecycle Services how to access the Azure subscription. Okay, so once we click on that tile, we get some options, and the first place we're going to go into is into the Azure connections. We're only going to deploy the demo environment here, so we're not going to need to look at any of the other options in this form. Okay, so once we're in this form, the first thing we're going to do is add the Azure connection. So deploying Azure 365 for Operations requires that the global admin, so it's typically a system admin, authorizes access for the Lifecycle Services deployment in the tenant that the D365 trial license has been added to. So it is important to consider your users before you begin this configuration. Having them in the same tenant is definitely recommended. So the subscription owner of the Azure subscription is not necessarily the same user as the owner of the original tenant where the license has been added. So in here you're going to want to click to authorize the link first of all. So the authorize, you'll see it in blue sort of in the center of the screen there. So the first option here is, or the first action you'll have is to actually authorize your organization in Lifecycle Services. So once you click on the authorization, you're granting the admin consent. In this case, it's already been completed, so it is a one-time authorization. This is just, in this case, we're just verifying the setup. Yes, it's been authorized. So in this case, you'll see that the link here is underlined in red, the hyperlink for the web page in Lifecycle Services now that we're in the admin consent. The ID in the URL is the directory ID for the Azure tenant. So that is the tenant that has the AX license code that Lifecycle Services is linked to. So it's not the subscription ID. So if you had multiple Azure tenants and you needed to confirm which particular tenant you're associated with here, you can look up that ID within the URL to trace it back to confirm you're in the correct one. Okay, so once that's done, we're going to go ahead and sign into Lifecycle Services again. Or sorry, you're going to sign in to your particular user ID. In this case, the global admin is going to sign in to enable that particular functionality. So again, standard sign-in page going to show up. And then you're going to accept, and you're going to return to this page. Again, you're going to have to accept that this is, in fact, the user, and you're giving it permissions for the deployment services. So once you've done that, you may encounter some errors. I know we've encountered them fairly frequently. This particular error is if the Dynamics deployment service does not have the correct access. So again, system admin access is required in order to get through these screens. The second error, if the ARM is enabled, but the selected connector is not onboarded to ARM. So you may see this. There is an option to confirm that the ARM is enabled as we're going through, but this is another error that you may see in your deployment. Okay, so once you've gone through the authorization process, now you need to connect the Lifecycle Services to the Azure subscription. So this is easiest if the Lifecycle Service user has admin rights to the Azure subscription. And again, here you're going to click on the add. This is where you're going to ensure that that ARM, so we just saw that error message confirming that the Azure Resource Manager is turned on. So in this case, you're going to connect your Azure subscription, and you're going to need to enter that Azure subscription ID from when you set up Azure. So earlier, Henrik mentioned that you would want to make a note of that subscription ID because you're going to need it later. This is where you're going to use it, and you're going to enter it into Lifecycle Services while you're linking Lifecycle Services to Azure. So ensure that you do turn on that ARM as you go through, as this is required in order to get the linking configured correctly. Okay, so once you've gone through that process, you should be able to see you're now into the Azure setup, and you just need to go through and click Next. And then you're going to move in again into the Azure setup. So you're going to be ensuring you're a subscription user or downloading a management certificate that gives you an option. So in this case, we're moving through with a user ID that we've configured, and the user is already showing up in the subscription just by clicking Next. Okay. So as you're going through, you're then going to set up the Azure region for your configuration. So is where Lifecycle Services needs to know what Microsoft data center the demo should run from. So if you're in the U.S., within the U.S., there's no cost difference by picking one particular region or another. So for demo purposes, picking the one that's closest to you within the U.S. is typically the recommended approach. If you're moving into a production environment, for example, in some countries there are requirements that the data needs to be housed within your country of origin, for example. So that may become more relevant as you move into production. But for demo purposes, we're just going to pick the region that's closest to us. Okay, so we've now got the connection to the Azure subscription. So we've gone through, we've authorized our organization, and then we've added the particular Azure connection. So you can see that Azure subscription ID is showing. We've got our information now pulling through into Lifecycle Services, and with that we're ready to go ahead and actually do the deployment of the virtual machine from within Lifecycle Services. So I'm going to hand it back to Henrik, and he's going to take us through deploying the virtual machine within Lifecycle Services.
And in Lifecycle Services, under Environment, that's in the middle of the whole scrolling back and forth page, we need to click on the plus sign. Then we need to select the topology. And we have the options. We have the Azure and we have the local. And the local deployment basically takes you to Microsoft Connect, where you can download a predefined VSD file you can add to a Hyper-V server. And as Tanya pointed out, it's not optimal unless you want to do the small POC or do a little learning. The Azure environment is much more updated. It's typically newer builds that's available. So we'll select the Azure environment here. Then we can select between a demo deployment or a dev test deployment. We will use the demo deployment here. It's only a single VM. The dev test deployment is multiple VMs. You can actually have as many as you like. And they are linked. They are predefined, pre-deployed with a lot of the setups. Once we click on that, then the next option is to select what release of Dynamics 365 you want to start with. Platform Update 6 is the latest one. It's just a few weeks old. So we will select that. This gives us some deployment options. And everything we basically choose within the deployment option is being used as input into all the scripting that Microsoft have done as part of the deployment process from LCS. Right now, for Update 6, there's only this version you can choose, but for some of the other updates, you can choose between different releases, if you like. So next, we need to choose the standard demo data, and as Tanya pointed out, with the Azure subscription, that's the only way we basically can choose to have no demo data at all. And it's also the only option where we can choose to have public sector demo. The financial reporting is another database, and there's no option to select data for that. You'll create that later. Then we go to disk space configuration. This is an import of how the VM is performing. And what Microsoft is basically doing in Azure is that they are limiting the performance you can have per disk you add to a virtual image. So in order to improve the throughput, all the disks in the environment basically being bundled, then you get a larger IOPS number and higher performance. The maximum performance is linked to the VM type and the disk type. And also the size of the VM. For this kind of demo, we're using what's called Azure Standard Storage. It is possible to use premium storage. Premium storage is similar to using SSD storage. There's a considerable speed improvement in the VM if you use premium storage, but it's very expensive compared to standard storage. In two ways. Premium storage per gigabyte is more expensive, and also the way that Microsoft calculates it. Because if you deploy something using premium storage and you deploy a terabyte image, you're actually paying for the full terabyte image regardless if you're using everything within that terabyte. For standard storage, you can allocate a 1 gigabyte image, but if you only use 50 meg, you only pay for the 50 meg. So it's much more economic to use standard storage unless you need to do a very, very fast running demo environment. And also consider that even if the VM is shut down, you're still incurring cost for the storage. And for the premium storage, that could be quite high. In order to use a standard sized Azure VM, I'll just leave the default settings with 50 number of disks. If we are going to use premium storage, we can enable it here, and then also later in the selection of the VM, we would have to use a VM with S in the type name. That's required to support premium storage. It is possible to name your VMs in Azure. I'll just leave it have Microsoft generate a name here during the deployment. It's not really useful for when connecting or anything because everyone will get a URL they can click on. The index is used if you have multiple VMs in a test a demo environment. As part of deploying, you have the possibility to add in features and functionality. This is a GER, that's General Electronic Reporting. It's predefined add-ins for reporting purposes, so you can import, export data into AX. It's not required for the standard demo, so I will not select any, and these are being kept updated all the time. If you have CRM already, you might know there's a page where you can go to and basically click on CRM. You can click on multiple environments. It's possible to publish AX to that same page. I will show that on the next slide. It's just enabled here. You see it's the homedynamics.com, and your demo environment will basically show up with a link here that will go. If users click on that, they can access and basically will be running Dynamics 365 operation. I will just use here, create a new virtual network because we only have one VM. We don't need to link it or communicate with everything else. Next thing to do is select the size of the VM. And the selection of the VM has an impact on the running costs. There is more VMs available in Azure that you will see here. The VMs you can see depends on what's available in your data center, the type of subscription you have, and LCS. Sometimes when Microsoft add in new VM types in Azure, they will not show up here immediately until Microsoft updated the LCS deployments. The installation defaults to a D13 VM. I usually use another VM that's not as costly because typically it's not the power, the CPU processing power, and the memory that's really causing an impact on the demo. That's more the storage. This is a sample of the Microsoft pricing, and right now, if we use a D4 V2 promo VM, the VM as itself is around $620. On top of that, you have the storage costs. This is a promo offer because Microsoft they're moving to deploy cores differently. When you deploy from LCS and select a D4 V2 VM, you need to go into your Azure subscription, actually convert it to the promo one to take advantage of this cost. And this is a limited offer they have. So we now have the name of our VM. We have selected a D4 V2 VM. Accepted here. So we click on next. And we ask, are we sure we want to deploy? Yeah, we don't really have a choice. We want to run the demo. And we know we'll get the costs. So we'll continue. The VM is now being deployed. And in Azure, we see this screen. And up here, it will show deploying. It can take quite many hours to deploy. I've seen between 1 and 12 hours to deploy an image. It's usually around 3 to 4 hours to deploy an demo environment with the D4 VM and standard storage. Premium storage will significantly improve the deployment time. If you have this screen open, remember to refresh it manually, because it's not being updated. So if you just have this open and wait until it says deployed, you'll be waiting a long time. In Lifecycle Services, if you go one step back and have the whole overview of the project where we scroll back and forth, and a VM that's being deployed will show here as queued. This is also where we can see, without actually clicking on the link, if it started, stop it. You will even see if you're deleting an image. So now we go to the post-deployment configuration. We imagine 4 hours have passed. That's also why we are not doing this live. And we'll see when we go into LCS again that the image shows as deployed, and we can click on login and go to log into Dynamics AX. We'll not need to use any of these. Other things to look at on the screen here is there's a stop function here. It's basically a link into Azure. So the VMs that is running with the image can be start and stop from here. And this is a way to allow, if you have multiple users, just give them access to LCS with an LCS role that allows you to go in here, duplicate environment management or the project owner, and then can start and stop the VM without all the maybe more difficult finding out where to go in Azure. Also, if you want to delete this and want to delete all the storage and networking and everything at the same time, you can do this from LCS. You can deallocate the VM first, and then you will get the option to delete it afterwards. It's not on the screen here, but if you scroll down here, there's a list of service accounts used for the image. There will also be an account, an admin account, and a link so you can RDP to the running VM. And you need to go in here, scroll down here to get the password for that. And if you go to the VM, you'll basically find that there's a standard Windows 2012 R2 server or 16 running with a SQL database and an information service, and then all the AX components. There's some file shares where you have all the applications, everything. So from a development point, I kind of see how they've done it compared to other environments. It might be a little useful to go in there. So we clicked on the login to the image. But right now, the only user that can access this environment is the admin user that deployed. So we need to add some users. So it's a little fast here. There's multiple ways to go in here. You can scroll down here and find the system admin, or you can click here. Someone called this the burger. I cannot remember what the real name for this is. And then you unfold all the modules. This is similar to the old 2009 and 2012 kind of menus we had. So if you scroll down here, you will find the system administration, and then we go into users. Again, similar to what we had with the other environments. And then just to click import, and AX will actually, or Dynamics 365 Operations will actually see all the users you have in your the tenant that you used where you added in the license. So if you use your 365 tenant, you will have all your company users. Another thing also to do when we go in for the first time here, some users might want to use Management Reporter. They might use Workflow. In order to use those, they're deployed kind of a click-as application. It's like Office from 365 is deployed the same way nowadays. You need to add the new Dynamics 365 site as a trusted zone in your browser. So now we need to get Power BI integration to work. Dynamics 365 have some new workspaces, and a lot of them can show data, and that's shown using Power BI, and Power BI embedded licenses for the users are included in the subscription. So I'll go through the steps here. In order to connect Power BI, again, like any other AX version, everything is under the sys administration, so we go and find Power BI. There's also a search function up here. You can use generally, if you search Power BI, you'll also get here. Then we get this form here we need to fill out. First thing is to enable it and then fill out the information. The login information and Azure AD Power BI resource URI is already pre-filled. That's okay. You need to key in your Azure AD tenant. That's the tenant where you have all your users. And then we need to fill in a client ID and an application key. Those we will get by going into Azure, and I'll show that in the next few slides. You also need to key in a redirect URL, and this is basically the URL that you have for your AX environment, and where you need to have /OAuth on. The Power BI AP address, that's the default fill-in here, so nothing to do, and entities and IDs should also be the same. So where do we get those client ID and application key from? Here, I go to the classic, the old interface in Azure, because we need to create an application for Power BI. It's basically so we can have maintain security between our system and the VM and our users. So I go here and I click on my Active Directory. We have all the users. Out here, you'll basically, it's the same as we saw with the subscription in the new Azure interface. You have all the Azure options available. So when you log in, Active Directory, go in here, click on your Azure Active Directory. Then we need to select applications up here. And this is a little compressed, so we can show it on one screen. So the next thing to do is click Add here. And we need to select Add an application my organization is developing. Then there's a two-step process. We need to create the application. It's just a link. The name here for the application is not shown anywhere other than in Azure. So you can type anything. It actually, you cannot use uppercase letters. Even looks like I did it here. And you need to select a web application. And then we need to fill in more information. The sign-on URL, that is basically your URL, you access the new deployed environment in. And you can see that when you click log on in the browser, and it will show up like any other one. So just put that in, add OAuth, and then you can add in an app ID URI. It doesn't need to be any doesn't need to point to anything. It just needs to be a working URL, basically HTTPS :// and something. It's not really used, other than we need to have it in here. Then the next thing we need to do is to get the client ID and the other ID. So we click on Configure. And this is part of the next screen you see when you click Configure. So we need to scroll down. And here we have the client ID. So we need to copy that to AX. So we can click here and it will be copied to a clipboard, and you can keep it in a notepad. Oh, then we need to get a security key, and I always select for 2 years. Once you select it, you will see down here that you get a save option. And once you click save, it will show the key you need to have here. And we only show it once, so if you go back to the screen, you cannot see it again. So remember to save it in a notepad. Now we have all the information. And we imagine we have filled everything in the Power BI form in AX. So if we go to a place in the new Dynamics 365 where we have Power BI integration, like for the workspaces, the first thing the users will see there is this blue square, and all users will see that the first time. So they just need to click Get Started, and then authorize access to Power BI. I don't know any way to kind of do this on behalf of all the users. Microsoft has a wiki, and it also states that all users need to click here. Once click, success, and in the demo environment, if everything is right, you will see data using Power BI. Another thing that's very helpful in the demo environment, actually have access to help. There's something new called task guides, but they're not enabled by default. So we need to do that. And if we don't, we will see this error, and you will have users basically reaching out, hey, we cannot get the help, we cannot see the videos, we cannot see anything. So the way to fix that is go to System Administration, and then on the right here, you see there's a help setting, so it's just to click on that. And then, very important, the user that need to allow this and click here need to be an account that have project owner rights in LCS, or this will not work. So just to click here, and once you have done that, you get a screen and success, and we will see this. And the task pages should now work. And Tanya have here on this page collected some of the URLs where you can find more information about deploying and LCS and Power BI and all this. So there's a lot of information here you can read. But just following this guide, you should be able to get a working environment up and running.
Okay, so should we turn the floor over for some Q&A at this point? We have a couple of questions that have come in already. I'm also going to just put up one final poll question here, just asking to get a little more insight into when you and the audience plan or are considering an upgrade, or and I think that raises one of the first questions, which is how does a demo like this factor into upgrade planning?
You can basically use this as a proof of concept, a small one, or to explore out the new features that are available. You can use it to try the learning, but in order to do a real upgrade, you need to convert your licenses and get access to LCS in kind of the production version, where there's access to more tools and sizing for the environment, and there's basically a plan how you go through. But Microsoft have upgrade tools available for 2009, and they are coming out for 2012 if they're not out already. And the process is basically like any other AX upgrades. There's some code piece that needs to be imported, and then here's the difference. Data is kind of being upgraded through LCS. You use that, you connect to services there.
Okay, there's a question. There's a question from a little while earlier in the presentation asking about public sector. Someone writes, we're a public sector organization and need public sector license key. Is there anything different if you're taking that approach?
You don't need a public sector special license in order to deploy the VM. If you have access to customer source and have a number, and public sector organizations have that as well, then they can request and get the image and deploy. It's the license is basically in a tenant, and you can deploy with all the data options, the controls to the public sector or no data at all. And when the license is converted, it goes back. Public sector obviously has some different price, everything, but it's the same thing. There's no special keys you need in order to test out the public sector features.
Okay, we've had several people ask about getting access to today's slides. Is that something you want to address today, or should we perhaps address that after the event?
We can upload them as a PDF.
Okay, maybe we can talk about making those available when we also share the recording, which we're also recording right now. All right, so the next question, will you talk more about the difference between a demo environment and a dev test environment selection?
Yeah, the demo environment is the one VM being deployed. The option we saw earlier, where there's the dev test, if you select that, the minimum configuration is one development VM and one test VM. And they are linked together. And as part of the process, you will also need to configure Visual Studio and link that up into LCS. So that's an additional part. What you can do, you don't need to deploy a full dev test environment just to do training or Visual Studio Connect. You can connect the standard demo environment, and you can connect the standard Hyper-V to Visual Studio and try out development and learning. There's no real difference in that. So it's only if you want to have kind of more multiple development users and try to move code using LCS into the test environment that it makes sense, because it is more costly with the VMs. And this is different from when you're actually having the full production environment, because the production VM is included in the cost. There's a sandbox that's included, and there's one development VM included. The configuration is a little different from the VMs we have in this dev test setup. Internally at AX Mentor, we use the demo VMs for development and training.
Okay, somebody asks, we're currently running the base version of AX 2012. Is there a direct upgrade or migration path to 365, and would it be necessary to upgrade to 2012 R3 first?
There will be, if it's not released yet, it will come. It's not out yet. It will be, I think, June, coming out an option, so you can upgrade directly. The D365 database structure schema is basically the same as 2012 R3. So there's some work if you're on the RTM version and have one database, but all that will be considered in the process. So if you want to move, that should not be the biggest problem, that you're not on R3.
Jason, are there any more questions?
There's a question about dev test environments for developers working in India. Are there any special considerations there?
We actually have no experience deploying this in the Indian data center. But the development VMs, you can RDP into them from anywhere in the world.
Okay. Azure subscription pricing, is it dependent on the number of users that will be accessing the environment?
It's per named user. So if you're on a 2009, there's a way to convert your concurrent users into named users. And depending on how old your license is, there's types. So Microsoft basically providing you the full value of your investment and making sure you're getting enough named users. And then in D365, one user per one account that's accessing. There's different type of users depending on level of functionality access, just like 2012. And as part of kind of the upgrade, there's also you can convert fully to the fully subscription license, or you can only kind of pay additional cost for getting access to running in the clouds, having access to Power BI, easy integration with CRM, all the whole Azure thing, and really see how you can take advantage of that and move a little faster than your competitors that are not in the cloud.
Okay, I'm just looking for any final questions here. There's a question about Dynamics 365 launching in India. Might have to get back to you on that. I know CRM Online launched in India, which is now Dynamics 365 sales and other customer experience apps. I don't know about operations offhand, though. I don't know if you have any other insight on that, Tanya or Henrik.
No, not for India.
Okay. All right, well, we will start wrapping up here. I want to remind folks that we do have a very brief survey that will pop up after the event. We'd love to get any feedback on your experience in our session here today. I know our speakers always appreciate it too. It just takes a few seconds. I'm just going to check it one more time for questions. I'm not seeing. Okay, so there's one more question regarding demo environments. Can you do customizations in a demo environment?
You can do all the customizations you like. You have full access to do it. You just need a Visual Studio subscription, and then you can customize.
And what about installing a demo environment on a local PC rather than Azure? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's the Hyper-V deployment. If you go through and just create the LCS project and go through, click the plus sign for environment and choose to deploy locally, you will be taken to Microsoft Connect, and there's a number of files you download, you unrar them, and there's a Hyper-V file you can just attach to a Hyper-V server. Start that, and you need to key in there's an icon on the screen when you go into that image. Click on that. You can enter a user. It's being put into the database, and you can run from there. And you can connect that to Visual Studio online as well for all your code. It's not the latest build and all that, but it's working quite well, especially if you want to avoid some of the Azure costs.
All right, very good. Well, Henrik, Tanya, thank you so much for taking the time to take us through all this material today. Really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone in the audience for your questions. Much appreciated. A lot of great ideas there and thoughts. We're going to end it there. We will be following up with remaining details on recordings and slide information as well. That concludes today's event. Have a great day, everybody.